Ex Machina is a complicated film. Released in 2014, the film was written and directed by Alex Garland and tells the story of Caleb, a programmer for a Google-like company that wins a raffle to visit his isolated boss, Nathan. There, he learns that he will be conducting a version of the Turing test, a test to see if an AI has human-like intelligence on a humanoid android named Ava. From a technical filmmaking standpoint, the film is very well made. It's beautiful to look at, the directing is good, the lighting is very interesting, and the performances are all really great. This was also Alex Garland's directorial debut, if we're not counting 2012's Dread, which I find personally inspirational as a filmmaker myself. The thing most complicated about Ex Machina is not any of the technical filmmaking aspects, though. Rather, it's the story and the script. On the surface, the film seems to discuss themes that many other AI films have, whether an AI can truly be human or not. We've seen this in several films that discuss AI, like Blade Runner or Her. However, Ex Machina differs from these films in a key way. It's fundamentally a feminist film. As Sean rightly points out in his video, How Wikipedia Got Ex Machina Wrong,
this isn't a story about humans versus androids, it's a story about some people in a place, and ultimately neither Nathan nor Caleb see Kyoko and Ava as people. They see them as women.
Sean's video makes a very compelling argument as to why this interpretation is the intended way to view the film, one which this analysis will be using. However, feminism is not a blanket theory. There are many different types of feminism, such as intersectional feminism, white feminism, black feminism, transfeminism, and more. If looked at through an intersectional lens, aka a lens that takes race, gender, and sexuality into account when discussing feminism, Ex Machina is an allegory for the trans experience and engages in white transfeminism. And although it has depictions of Asian and black women, it does not engage in comprehensive intersectional analysis. Though it's not immediately apparent, with a deeper look, Ex Machina is an allegory for the transgender experience, and has a lot to say about gender identity. Spoiler warning for here on out. The first time she's introduced, Ava is an androgynous robot. She has no skin except for on her face, hands, and feet, exposing Caleb to her inner circuitry. The only gender that she has was the one assigned to her by Nathan. He designed her to resemble the female form, even including a vagina.
In between her legs, there's an opening with a concentration of sensors. You engage them in the right way, it creates a pleasure response.
But despite her design, Ava presents androgynously when we first meet her. At first glance, this can be interpreted as her being dehumanized, stripped by Nathan to expose her inner circuitry to Caleb to distance herself from the human form. Later in the film, however, as Caleb and Ava start to fall in love, Ava presents in a more feminine way, putting on a wig, a dress, and leggings, using photos of a human woman as a reference. She has access to these features, to the clothing, to the hair, but doesn't present that way until her and Caleb's third session together, showing that their bond has developed. Further, by the end of the film, when Ava leaves the facility, she is presenting as a woman. At this point in the film, she isn't being dictated by Caleb or Nathan at all. This is her decision. She's not performing for anyone, and there's no pressure to present a certain way. She presents this way because it's how she feels most comfortable and happy. Admittedly, Ava's experience here is different from the experiences of transgender people. Based on what the film communicates, Ava starts out as androgynous and identifies with the gender that she was assigned from at birth. The comparison certainly isn't perfect, but it's not trying to be. As Fusion wrote in the article for the Huffington Post, quote, "When remarking on Ava's gender at an Ex Machina screening in San Francisco, Garland made a point of saying that Ava is female presenting, not simply female. While the body given to her in the movie was female, he rejected the idea that Ava's operating system had an inherent sex." The implication of Garland's statement here is clear. Ava embraces her identity in a way similar to how transgender people embrace their own identity. That is, in a way that is authentic and truthful to herself. The Fusion article in the Huffington Post argues that this allegory actually fails, stating that Ava never really had a choice in how she could present. Quote, Given access to a more diverse set of parts, knowing all the prejudices that persist, would she still have chosen to present as female? It's almost hard to imagine she wouldn't have grabbed a dick on her way out into the world. The article argues that Ava can't choose to present as a woman, considering that she only has feminine parts to choose from. And, knowing the systemic patriarchy that permeates throughout the world, she likely wouldn't have presented female. However, Ava could have left the facility without applying any feminine parts, continuing to live as an androgynous android. But she didn't. She took female-presenting parts and applied them to herself. She dressed in feminine clothing. She wore a long-haired wig. Yes, it's true that Ava didn't have access to different parts, but she didn't have to wear a dress. She could have easily grabbed some of Nathan's clothes from his closet and worn short hair, but she didn't. This was a clear and deliberate decision by Garland. She could have expressed her gender in different ways throughout the film, but it's the ways in which she does express her gender and doesn't that dictate her feelings as a character and the ways in which she wants to present. Although the film isn't as explicit of a trans allegory as The Matrix or I Saw the TV Glow, it's clear that Ex Machina is making a statement on gender identity and how our gendered categories are socially constructed. With all this being said, though, how is Ex Machina a white trans feminist film? As stated earlier, Ex Machina is a white transfeminist film. What exactly does that mean? Better yet, what is transfeminism? Transfeminism is a form of intersectional feminism that focuses on sexist, transphobic oppression. Transfeminism is not solely focused on the experiences of trans women. Rather, it considers how transgender people are broadly treated and viewed as an oppressed class. Because transfeminism is intersectional, it often considers race as a key component, understanding that transgender people of color are at higher risk of oppression than white trans folk. White transfeminism, on the other hand, focuses solely on the experiences of white transgender people. It's similar to white feminism in that way. Both tend to largely overlook, ignore, or trample over women of color in favor of creating a generalized approach to live with systemic oppression. And Ex Machina leans into this framing. One of the key characters in the film is Kyoko, an Asian woman. She is Nathan's assistant that we meet after the second session. Nathan explains to Caleb that Kyoko cannot understand English and that he hired her to protect the secrecy of Ava.
Oh, are you fucking kidding me? Did it get on you?
No, it's all right. I got it.
Dude, you're wasting your time talking to her. She doesn't understand English. Just give her the napkin. It's like a firewall against leaks. It means I can talk trade secrets over dinner and know it'll go no further. But it also means that I can't tell her that I'm pissed when she's so fucking clumsy that she spills wine over my house guest. Hey, Kyoko. Go.
In reality, Kyoko is an android like Ava. And although she was programmed to not speak by Nathan, she could understand what Caleb and Nathan have been saying this entire time. She reveals this to Caleb, and he reacts by planning to free Ava from the facility, implicitly leaving Kyoko behind. Unlike Ava, Kyoko is never able to actualize her own identity. From the first time we are introduced to her, she is seen wearing very short skirts, and the subsequent times we see her in the film, she is seen almost or completely naked. There is no chance for her to self-actualize her identity or independence, as she is at the constant whim of Nathan's sexual desires. Only Ava is afforded the privilege of self-actualization. Kyoko's depiction here actually leans into a concept known as techno-Orientalism. In Orientalism, Asian women are depicted as nonverbal and are objectified and sexualized to make the process of Western domination over Asia easier. Techno-Orientalism, on the other hand, engages in Oriental practices, but in a slightly different form. Quote, works such as William Gibson's Japan-based Overture, including Neuromancer, Ridley Scott's Blade Runner, and the Wachowskis' The Matrix films, have also burnished into the Western consciousness Asian-influenced versions of the future underpinned by a familiar yet estranged mixture of Orientalist sensibilities. These examples perfectly illustrate our definition of techno-Orientalism, the phenomenon of imagining Asia and Asians in hypo or hyper-technological terms in cultural productions and political discourse. Ex Machina clearly engages in these ideas in its depiction of Kyoko. Not only is she hypersexualized, but she is also an object of immense technological admiration. Yes, Nathan is supposed to be a despicable person in the film, but this was not a moment of characterization for Nathan. This was a script writing decision. Making Kyoko an Asian, nonverbal, hypersexualized, and extremely advanced technological woman leans into the depictions of how Asian women are portrayed in media through a techno-orientalist lens. All of these aspects, the techno-orientalist lens, Kyoko's lack of agency and self-actualization, and her objectification all climax at the end of the film, providing frightening implications regarding what it means to be transgender. Before Caleb's plan goes into effect, Kyoko enters Ava's room, and it's implied that Kyoko informed Ava of Caleb's plan. Once Caleb's plan goes into effect, Ava and Kyoko meet outside of Ava's cell, and together they kill Nathan, with Kyoko being killed in the process. Ava then takes the skin from one of the androids in Nathan's office and leaves without Caleb. This android is an Asian woman named Jade, and Ava takes her skin and leaves the facility. In fact, the remaining androids in the facility, most of whom are women of color, are all left behind. To be clear, Ava actualizes her own identity off of the literal skin, death, and abandonment of women of color. Her happiness, being female presenting and white, is something she achieves by what the film argues is a necessary sacrifice of women of color. Ex Machina's engagement with race doesn't stop at white transfeminism. Race is a constant theme in the film, and Alex Garland opts to lean into the white supremacist ways that Asian and black women are portrayed in media rather than subverting them. Kyoko and Jade aren't the only women of color in the film with a prominent role. Jasmine, a black female android, is also in the film. Albeit a smaller role than Jade or Kyoko, she's part of the reason Caleb becomes convinced to save Ava from her cell. As Caleb snoops around Nathan's office, he comes across footage from the other 3 androids that Nathan created. Lily, a white woman, and Jade both beg Nathan for their freedom behind the glass prison cell. Jade even bangs her arms against the door to the point where they start falling off of her body.
Why won't you let me out?
I already told you why. Because you're very special.
Why won't you let me out?
We're gonna do this again.
Why won't you let me out?
The only android who doesn't beg to be freed is Jasmine. She lacks any face, and the only head she had is a metal skull. Her body is completely lifeless and nude throughout all the interactions Nathan has with her. He tries to get her to write on a piece of paper, and when he can't do that, starts trying to drag her lifeless body away. As the article Dismembered Asian American Android Parts in Ex Machina as Inorganic Critique puts it, quote, Jasmine is the only android whose head does not evolve past the metallic robot skull, even as the rest of her body resembles a naked black woman. Lily and Jade can convincingly walk like humans, but Jasmine is immobile, seated at a desk, and non-responsive when Nathan speaks to her, eerily like a father attempting to get his child to draw on a piece of paper. This portrayal of Jasmine is not unlike how black women have been represented throughout history. Since the slave trade, black femininity has been categorized as the opposite of white femininity, allowing for the commodification, hypersexualization, and extreme objectification and dehumanization of black women. And we still see a lot of this commodification and objectification of black bodies today. Whether intentional or not, Jasmine's lack of a face perpetuates these characterizations that are directly harmful to black women, and have even contributed to present-day quarrels for white trans women and questions around their femininity. Jasmine's depiction here is yet another instance from Garland of portraying non-white women in a way that perpetuates harmful stereotypes and ideas. None of these portrayals can be perceived as characterization for Nathan. His character is dehumanizing these androids, yes, but he isn't the one portraying them in the ways that perpetuate stereotypes. That's Garland's doing. That being said, was Garland intentionally portraying women of color this way? Almost certainly not. He even said as much in an interview. Quote, "Sometimes you do things unconsciously, unwittingly, or stupidly, I guess, and the only embedded point that I knew I was making in regards to race centered around the tropes of Kyoko, a mute, very complicit Asian robot." But this fact doesn't let Garland off the hook. Yes, he wrote Kyoko's character knowing of the tropes of Asian women in media, and Kyoko revolting against Nathan was supposed to commentate on how these stereotypes can be resisted. But the multiple other ways in which Kyoko and Jade play into techno-Orientalist and Orientalist tropes cannot be ignored, and neither can Jasmine's representation throughout the film. Self-admittedly, Garland did not realize these things while writing his screenplay, and his lack of introspection led him to make a film that, on the surface, is a feminist story about women rising against their oppressors, but on a deeper level, fails at being an intersectional feminist film, rather opting to take a white trans-feminist approach to gender and race. Garland's lack of introspection is not something that is solely on him, and speaks to a greater problem in the art and media that's produced today. As media producers, we must be aware of the information, ideologies, and discourse we are spreading, and often we don't care to look deeper into the things we share, create, or consume. We must engage critically with the media we consume, and as media producers, we have to think about what we are posting or creating before we put it out into the world. Not doing so can have harmful consequences. Ex Machina isn't a bad film. It's a well-made film. It's highly entertaining, narratively engaging, and a really good watch. But it's a film that suffers due to a lack of introspection from its creator. It employs techno-Orientalist and Orientalist depictions of its Asian characters, white supremacist depictions of its black character, and takes a white trans-feminist approach rather than an intersectional approach to storytelling.